Today, we're unpacking a really fascinating, maybe even challenging question.
Indeed. How does something that seems like progress or even, grace, how can that become a profound test for us?
Right, and our starting point is way back in Genesis chapter 6. It sets this scene, doesn't it? Humanity growing, but also wickedness increasing, judgment looming.
But usually there's that detail about Noah finding favor, finding grace. That's key.
So jumping forward quite a bit, our sources bring us to Augustine, his big work, The City of God.
Yeah, written between 413 and 436 AD. And you have to remember the context. It's huge. Rome had just fallen in 410 AD.
A massive shock. And people were blaming Christianity, which was relatively new as the official religion.
Exactly. It only became official in 392 AD, so Augustine steps in.
And what was his big takeaway from seeing this mighty, visible empire just crumble?
Well, his core insight was pretty radical. He basically said, look, the visible kingdom, Rome, yes, it's falling apart, but there's an invisible kingdom, God's kingdom, being built.
An invisible kingdom.
Right. And he talked about suffering. He argued the amount of suffering, well, it hits everyone. A serious illness, a common cold suffering is suffering.
Okay.
But, and this is the key part, the quality of suffering is different. It depends on your response. Are you just complaining, or are you actually seeking God's will through it?
That reframes everything.
Yeah.
Complaining versus seeking. And how does that ancient idea connect to, well, to now?
That's where it gets interesting. The material we looked at suggests some modern paradox. Our material civilization, technology, industry, it's zoomed ahead.
Absolutely.
But our spiritual culture, things like religion, morality, our inner lives, maybe hasn't kept pace. It seems to have declined in some ways.
Leading to this phrase the source uses, poverty and abundance. Life feels harder even with all this stuff.
Exactly. And the sources argued that some of our biggest societal blessings, our graces, have kind of flipped on us, become tests.
Like what, for instance?
Well, take democracy, obviously intended as a good thing, a grace. But the perspective here is that it's sometimes led to extreme individualism, just my rights.
Right, potentially pushing a purely human-centered view that, ironically, the source suggests could be destructive.
And capitalism, too. Max Weber linked its origins to Protestant ethics, hard work, diligence.
Protestant ethic, yeah.
But the argument now, from this viewpoint, is that it can degenerate. People becoming, in a sense, slaves to money, facing real hardship because of it.
In science, this seems like an undeniable good.
Oh, the convenience is incredible, smartphones, everything. But the source points to a potential downside. Scientism.
Scientism. Meaning
Sort of an overreach, an unbelief in anything that science can't strictly prove. The source kind of contrasts this with creation science, which they frame as doing science with faith. Their slogan is apparently, we don't believe in science, we do science with faith.
interesting distinction. So all this paints a picture of our time as a sort of spiritual battleground.
Yeah.
Visible versus invisible.
That's the framing, yes. An intense clash. And the source points to specific issues as examples of this battle, like shifts around human sexuality.
How so?
Well, the material presents it not just as changing feelings, but as a direct challenge to the idea of male and female as created in Genesis. It mentions the 2015 U.S. Supreme Court ruling on marriage as a key moment in this shift.
Okay. And it mentions other areas too.
Yes, it talks about what it calls a terrifying war for the gospel in certain parts of the world. And it brings up things like corporations pushing for halal certification.
Halal food, how does that fit in?
The source interprets it as a signifier of deeper spiritual dynamics, suggesting it points to a subtle shift in cultural influence, even using the example of prayer rooms and airports sometimes being specifically oriented towards Mecca.
And it also touches on just general immorality?
Yeah, things becoming more open, maybe more vulgar. It cites examples like male stripping shows or host bars as signs of society, quote, going all the way to the end.
Wow. It's definitely a heavy perspective. And it loops back to Genesis 6.
Right back. The point made is that population growth itself was a grace. But the mixing the sons of God, seen as Seth's righteous line, mixing with the daughters of humans, Cain's line that led to the wickedness.
So there's this metaphor used, the law of recessive inheritance.
Yeah, suggesting that when people of faith mix without discernment, the world's spiritual vitality diminishes. The really heavy takeaway is that, in this view, the world's fate kind of rests on the shoulders of God's people.
That's a huge responsibility.
It is, but then, right there, in the midst of all that wickedness in Genesis 6, you have Noah.
Noah, who found favor in the eyes of the Lord.
Exactly, Genesis 6.8. He received grace. And Hebrews tells us it was by faith, fueled by that grace, that he built the ark and saved his family.
Which brings us right back to where we started, grace.
We live by it too. You know, the Apostle Paul put it perfectly. What I am by God's grace.
So the thought to leave you with, our listener, is really this. What does it mean for you to live in that kind of grace right now in this complex age? How do you strive for faith, for love, knowing the incredible gift you've received?